and academic publications have been target of a lot of criticism in recent years. Religious zealots, politicians, pundits, and butthurt scientists all disdain journals when they publish research that could jeopardize their political goals, personal interests, or religious beliefs. Peer reviewing, being one of the main reasons why these journals exist in the first place, has been constantly target of the vitriol. And to their credit, there has been instances when peer reviewing has failed epically. A very recent scandal was the publication of a hoax article in the journal Gender, Place and Culture, suggesting that dog humping reinforces rape culture. Yeah, dog humping. Some critics of peer reviewing use this example as a demonstration, as proof that the system is completely broken. But I think that is jumping the gun. I think what this example really shows is that there are many publications like Gender, Place and Culture. They are not scientific, but claim themselves to be scientific and claim to be peer-reviewed just in order to give credibility to their content. So what it shows here is that just because a journal calls itself peer-reviewed, just because a journal calls itself scientific, it doesn't mean that it is reviewed, and it doesn't mean that it is committed to scientific methodology. And if you are interested in knowing how you could determine when a journal is or isn't committed to scientific methodology, there are a few ways by which you could do that. Bear with me, and by the end of the video, I will show you how. Similar to the dog humping affair, but less amusing, science correspondent John Bohnan made a similar sting operation in 2013. He wrote a fake article authored by a fake scientist associated with a fake institution reporting the discovery of the anti-cancer properties of a fake drug. He mined his fake paper with very silly mistakes that according to him anyone with a little more than high school level of chemistry should be able to detect. And he sent his paper to 304 open access publications. And to his surprise, 60% of them accepted.
I am shocked and appalled.
What this sting operation shows is that the system of open access combined with the internet make it very easy for dodgy publishers to try to profit from frustrated researchers that couldn't get their work published in top publications. It's very easy for them to create a fake journal, ask researchers to pay a fee to have their work published, and then don't even bother to look at it. That doesn't mean, of course, that there aren't great publications that are open access. PLOS ONE is a great example of a top quality journal that is completely open. But the problem of unscientific studies and fraud is not only common among open access or humanities research. Top publications are not immune to fraud and unscientific studies making through their peer reviewing process. Science itself, the journal has been involved in a number of hoaxes and frauds. In 2015, Science retracted a paper about how canvases influence people's opinions on gay marriage when the lead author failed to provide the original data for his analysis. The ASIC DNA paper is a more famous case that, according to many scientists, was a very unscientific research they made through the peer reviewing of science. And to make things even more controversial, Science hasn't yet retracted this paper. The most damning case, however, of fraud in the scientific community, in scientific publications, was certainly the Schön affair in 2001. Jan Henrik Schön was a German physicist that in 2001 rose to scientific stardom when he published a number of articles about his breakthrough research on semiconductors. Now, not only he had a number of articles published on top publications like Science and Nature, but also he won a number of awards for his work. And it turned out to be a fraud. All of it. When other researchers tried to replicate his work, they realized that something was a little bit off in his results. It seemed like he had just copied and pasted the same result over and over again in order to gain false positives. And after some investigation, that's exactly what was found out, that all of his work was a hoax. It was completely fraudulent. Now that led Schön to lose his job, to have his career, academic career basically over, and to have his PhD revoked. But do cases like the Schön affair are examples that the peer reviewing system is useless, that it doesn't do what it's supposed to do and should be simply abandoned? Well, I don't think so. I think in some ways it shows that it works. And I'll explain why. I think one mistake people make is assuming that publication in a journal is the last step of evaluating the scientific merit of a research. I don't think so. I think it's just an intermediate process. The journals work as filterers, as gatekeepers of science. It goes through a very thorough process to evaluate the quality of the paper and the quality of the research. After it goes through this process, it is published, and then the totality of the scientific community will be acquainted to the research, we will study it and try to replicate it. That's when the real test begins. The truth is, it's impossible to eliminate false positives in research. Due to probability, it's pretty safe to assume they will always occur, and it's not always due to fraud or malice of the researcher. Sometimes data dredging can occur for a number of reasons. It could be to an unconscious bias, it could be due to simply there being too many variables in a research, that could be because of the sample size, and it just could be a distortion in the case of the sample that you chose. It's not always fault of editors and reviewers not to spot these mistakes. Sometimes it's impossible for them to do so. And that's why replication studies are so important, because they will come in to try to see if the result was or wasn't a false positive. And when these cases occur, and the researcher fails to provide evidence to support his or her claims, journals retract the paper. And to me, that is a great virtue of the system that is often missed, because this shows how the system is reliable. When a research is found to be unscientific or fraudulent, they are simply retracted. They are no longer part of the publication. They are no longer considered. They are basically disowned by the publication. To me, this shows that these publications are committed to good science. They are committed to keeping their reputation intact. They could have simply take away the responsibility, say it wasn't their fault, they did all the procedure necessary, and try to sweep it under the rug. But they usually don't do that. They assume the mistake and they try to improve their processes in order to avoid these mistakes from happening again. Journals like Science and Nature have been doing this for a very, very long time, and they built their reputation over 100 years. So of course, their reputation is the main asset that they have, and that is why so many researchers want desperately to have their work published on Science and Nature, because these journals are extremely reputable. That is not to say, of course, that there aren't major problems with peer reviewing. There are some problems that need to be addressed, and especially in top publications. And some of these top publications admit it themselves. Last year, Nature published an interesting article about the positive bias in research, something that happens maybe more often in medical research. And this is serious, because null and negative results are just as important to science as positive results. The positive bias generates a problem for researchers, and sometimes their work that had null and negative results just ends up not getting published, and the scientific community is not aware of the results. That can undermine scientific progress. Another bias that top publications have is towards new or breakthrough research instead of simply replication studies. But replication studies are just as important, as they can either confirm or refute a hypothesis. They need to be published. Scientists need to be aware of the results of these studies, and often top publications ignore them. Another major problem, also reported by Nature. The story was actually reported on Science magazine. Sorry. There are many young researchers ghost writing peer reviewing reports for scientists, for senior scientists. This is, in my opinion, a very, very huge problem. This could be the case why sometimes many subpar articles end up being published by top publications. Young researchers are often not competent enough to be able to review brand new research. If a scientist doesn't have the time to review a particular article, he or she should simply abstain from doing it. Asking an unqualified person to do it for them is not only fraud, but can undermine the progress of a particular field. They are working against science by doing this, and it's honestly quite disgraceful. Shame on them.
Shame indeed.
Other criticisms to traditional journals is the time that it takes for a paper to be reviewed and the lack of transparency in the processing, in the peer reviewing process. Michael Eisen, one of the founders of the Public Library of Science, has been a major critic of that. And one of the reasons why he started his open access journal, PLOS, was in a way to make the process faster and more transparent. Whether you agree or not with Eisen's criticisms, I don't agree with everything he says, you have to recognize that PLOS journals have reshaped the landscape of scientific and academic publications. They show that it's possible to have high quality publications that are completely open access and with a very transparent process. This has really challenged traditional methods of publication and has changed. Nature is today, for example, a lot more transparent than it used to be. Nature also has its own open access journal. Elsevier has a number of open access journals. It has really changed the way things work in science, and in my opinion have improved the quality and have improved how the process is done. So this is something that cannot be ignored by the open access system. But even PLOS's open access journals are peer reviewed. The best argument for peer review is the fact that the scientific community is behind it. In a recent survey with over 2,000 scientists, 82% of them agree that without peer reviewing there is no control in scientific research, and 60% of them reported to be satisfied with the process. Only 9% said to be dissatisfied. This shows that the scientific community embraces it, because honestly there isn't anything better. The system isn't perfect, needs to be improved, but it certainly shouldn't be replaced, not until we have something better, and we don't. As promised, now I'm going to show you a few ways how you can identify when a journal or a specific paper is reliable as scientific source. So let's go. There are a few tools you can use to identify whether a journal is or isn't reliable. Now, there are a number of directories that you can access. Ulrichsweb is probably the most reliable one. However, the problem with Ulrichsweb, as you can see, it's not open. You need a password to be able to access. It's not open to most people. It's open to some libraries, so maybe your public library might have access to Ulrichsweb, and universities. So if you're going to uni, you can check if your uni has access to this website. This is a pretty good website, and most of the journals that are here are pretty reliable as good source of scientific and academic information. Another database, one I particularly like, is Google Scholar. Google Scholar is pretty good, and I'll show you why. So for example, let's do a research of cancer studies. Now if you do a research of cancer studies, you'll see here a number of things that have been listed. Now let's put any time, and there you go. Here you have, for example, a report from 2014 that is cited over 5,000 times. So this is always a good indicator for quality research. But this tells you about a specific paper. What about a journal? Well, when it comes to journals, the main thing that usually people look is the impact factor. So impact factor is a number that comes from the number of citations from the past 2 or 3 years divided by the overall number of papers that were published in a particular journal for the past 2 or 3 years. So here's an example of the impact factor of Nature in 2017. So here you have how it works. So this, according to Scopus, are the best journals in their site score, which is based mostly on impact factor. So these journals get a lot of citations. So it usually means that these are pretty reliable journals. So another one is Simago. Simago, it's, in my opinion, better because it's not only impact factor, there are other things that they analyze. So they have their own indicator, the SJR indicator, and differently from Scopus, it's the citations of the 3 previous years. So this is pretty important because it gets a broader average. And one final thing to keep in mind is one research, one particular report is not enough to guarantee that the findings are true. As we've seen during the video, false positives occur often in science. So in order to have something as true, as that you can be confident that is true, you need a very high number of replication studies that will confirm the results of a report. So if you want to be serious about a research on any topic, you should read not only 1 or 2 papers, but you should try to read as many papers about the topic as you can and see if they all confirm the same findings. Thank you for your time and staying with me and making to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, if you thought it was useful, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Help me out spreading the good word of science and reason in this crazy, chaotic world that is the internet. I've been Sarah Michel, and hopefully I will see you next time. Cheers.